Good evening, brothers and sisters. Were you nervous? One of the things that I kind of thought about doing tonight, I just thought about it. It was kind of interesting because I had at least 3 people mention that this is what I should do too. I wanted to give us a little bit of a taste of what it is to worship in the Philippines. Because if there are any number, 4 or 5 people together, that when they get to the building, they start singing. And it doesn't matter if it's on the hour or not. They'll sing until it's time to start. And that's sort of what I just wanted to give us a taste of. Now, the furtherance that I had thought about doing, shutting off the AC, shutting off the lights, opening up all the windows, but it was still way too cool today for that to have any type of real impact. And of course, that wouldn't be following the golden rule. I am thankful for the opportunity and the privilege to have been able to go to a foreign country, to go to a foreign land, and to experience what I was able to experience. 29 days ago, 28 days tomorrow, was the first time that this individual had ever left the borders of the country in which he was born. He had never left the United States of America. And I started to embark on a trip to do that. It's been a year of first for me. In many ways, never had a passport before this year. Never had the opportunity to set foot in a foreign land when I landed in Tokyo and got off the airplane and walked through that airport terminal, which struck me. Like, well, I'm on the other side of the world now. After a 14, 16-hour flight from there. And then, of course, just a few short hours later, getting on another airplane to fly another 4 hours down into Manila, Philippines. And again, just an absolute, I don't want to say surreal because that just sounds too flamboyant, but it was absolutely a unique and thrilling experience. I'm doing what I'm doing tonight and following after an example that we have set forth in the book of Acts. Luke records in Acts chapter 21, beginning in verse 17, where he says, "After we arrived in Jerusalem, the brothers and sisters received us gladly. And the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and the elders were present. And after they had greeted them, he began to relate one by one the things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they had heard about them, they began glorifying God, and they said to him, 'You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law, and they have been told about you, that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to abandon Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or to walk according to the customs.'" Of course, the impetus of what it was that Paul was doing was telling them and relating to them about his experience among the Gentiles in particular. Now, I don't have a report to say the many thousands that we impacted. I'm not going to go that far of a stretch. But in 2024, I got to go to the Philippines. This is their national flag. And if you don't know anything about the Philippine nation, I'll share with you a few facts about them as a sort of a background. This is the Google Maps or the Google Earth view of the islands of the Philippines. And it looks pretty big. It fits pretty much about in between, dead center halfway between the Tropic of Cancer and the equator. So we're north of the equator, south of the Tropic of Cancer. Pretty much you're looking at the area which would be considered, if we're just going to go straight south from where we live, southern Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador, and in that area in between North and South America is where we're talking about physically up and north and south on the map. Manila has over 7,600 islands. That's the latest tally. It used to be, they thought maybe there was about 7,100, but recently, about 10 years ago, they've discovered or they've cataloged or categorized an additional 500 plus as being in their territory or in their waters. So that sounds like a lot, right? 7,600 islands. They've got to be huge in landmass, right? Well, they only occupy 120,000. I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint. That was much darker on my computer. Sorry. 120,000 square miles of land is all. Now, any of you geographical buffs of the United States want to hazard a guess to how many states in our country are bigger and have more land than the Philippines? 5. Our 5th biggest state, which I come to learn, I didn't realize it, was New Mexico. New Mexico sits with about 130,000 square miles of land. So Philippines is in between, is under that, is smaller in land than this whole state of New Mexico. However, it boasts a population of over 116 million. Think about that. 116 million people. The United States has just a little over 330 million. 1/3 of the U.S. population resides in an area smaller than New Mexico. That should maybe strike a chord with the population density in some areas. Again, in some areas. It still has a vast amount of open land and territory that they use for cultivating and for farming, especially, of course, rice, corn, and other things. But that's, again, one of the stats about the island of the Philippines. Their largest city is the considered Manila Metro, and that is Manila. This is, I have a laser pointer. Probably kind of hard for me to point out here, but Manila is there on the larger northern island, and it's a pretty big geographical area. However, that area contains, as you can see by the number there, 13 million people in the Metro Manila area. By contrast, that occupies 245 square miles of space, is what's considered Manila Metro. And again, for contrast, New York City has but 8.25 million, and in almost 50 more square miles. New York City proper, metropolitan area, is 300 square miles and has less people, 5 million less people than Manila Metro does. And something that I didn't know about Manila, or about the Philippines in general, is that it was really occupied by the Spaniards. Spanish in 1565 made it to the Philippine Islands. It was later also influenced by the American colonials until about 1934. It was invaded by Japan during World War II in 1941, and then liberated by the U.S., of course, in our more recent history in 1944 and 1945. And, of course, gained and solidified its sovereignty as a sovereign nation in 1946. So a fairly new country in the terms of some other countries that we know about. But those, again, are just some interesting facts about the Philippine Islands. So this is the globe, and of course you know where Chicago is. You know that's the flight that I took from Chicago to Tokyo, 6,340 miles according to Google Maps. Again, about 14 and a half, 15 hours for the flight time. This picture here is a photograph that I took from the airplane looking down as we were going across that little outcrying of land that was Alaska. And that is a glacier within the mountains as we were going over that arch. To go down and across, again, in a straight line isn't necessarily, around on the earth. You got to go up and over. And that was the path we took. And that was noteworthy to me because I've seen really, really itty-bitty glaciers before at Glacier National Forest in the U.S., but nothing of that magnitude or impact. And that made an impression on me, again, for the marvelous handiwork of our Creator God that just simply tells of His glorious and His magnitude. Then, from Tokyo, when we landed, we went down to Manila, which added on another 1,900 miles, 4 hours worth of flight time from there to Manila. We landed in Manila at about 9:30, And an interesting thing about landing in Manila at that time, according to Keith, it was the smoothest flight and smoothest trip he has ever had. And it was his 14th trip to the Philippine Islands. And so he was kind of on cloud nine as we get off of the airplane over 2 hours early. We weren't supposed to land until after 11 o'clock at night. So we're there just a little after 9 p.m. And he's like, wow, we're going to get some good sleep tonight. Cool. You know, he was happy and thought maybe I was the rabbit's foot. I don't know. not seriously. But that's when we landed. We got picked up there in Manila by a couple of brothers that then escorted us to the airport or the hotel where we stayed at the night, called the Belmont, there in Manila. It's right beside the terminal, so it was really just walking across the way there. So far, 8,240 miles covered. And some of you guys, know I like the bike. That's about 1 year's worth of bike rides for me, just to put in perspective for myself. Then we woke up Wednesday morning. We're escorted back from the hotel to the airport terminal, in which we picked up an airplane to fly from Manila up to Tuguegarao. Now, Tuguegarao is only about 200 miles as a crow flies from Manila. So it's not that far. It's less than an hour. It's about a 45, 50-minute flight from Manila there. And then we land in Manila, or land in Tuguegarao. And getting on the airplane was a similar affair, where you board on the tarmac, which was a new experience for me too, because I've only gone through the terminals and walked down the nice, air-conditioned gangplanks. But here you walk outside and the heat smacks you in the face. And so in landing in Tuguegarao, we're walking, of course, from the terminal from the airplane to the terminal. I thought it interesting because I didn't get it in that picture. They had a station for umbrellas as you were deboarding the plane that you could grab and cover as you walked to the terminal. It took less than 2 minutes to walk from the plane to the terminal. I thought that kind of, you're going to bake that quick in the sun. But there were people that were grabbing the umbrellas and getting underneath them. Maybe they're smarter than me because they live there, they know the area, and they needed to be protected from the sun. Me and Keith obviously aren't the smart ones. We're the white man from the States, so we know better. So we're just, making our way to the terminal, to the baggage claim area in order to pick up our bags. And then we're greeted by Rody Gumpad, of course. And I guess I need to back up a little bit. I should have probably started the story in this case, because Rody, of course, we had for a visit here last year. Keith has been in contact, of course, and Rody has been probably the primary contact that Keith has been in the Philippines with. And we had an occasion to have Rody come in to us, give us a report of the work there, preach for us. We met with him on a Sunday evening afterwards, the elders, that is, and us, in which he invited us to send someone to the Philippines. And it's kind of funny, they think it's all this finger pointing that went around the table. John pointing at me, pointing at Mark, pointing at Brian, and we're just, who's going to do it? And I was the one that got the lots cast upon, so okay, I'll go. And of course, that wasn't that way. It was a mutual thing. And but here I am, Sister Tessie, of course, there in between Keith and I, presented us with these adornments. I'm going to call them that. Nice, pretty flower on a necklace thing, kind of thing to welcome us there. I guess pretty much like the Hawaiians do, right, with the flowered lei. But a very warm welcome indeed, not just mentioning, of course, how hot it was, because you can't tell it there, probably mid-upper 90s is what we're looking at temperature-wise, humidity 70 to 80%, which is their standard weather pattern there at Tuguegarao, which I learned too is probably the hottest average temperature in the entire islands is Tuguegarao. It maintains the highest temperature recording, so it has that dubious honor and distinction as well. And then as we are commuting from the airport to the hotel, one of the things you get a picture of is the infrastructure or lack thereof. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a mess. That is their power system. That is a bunch of electrical lines. You got the one transformer hanging there off of right side of the pole, and then you've just got anybody, it seems like, that has an inkling to crawl up there and tape a wire on. As they say, knock yourself out, and you just might. And you just might. So I don't know, regulatory-wise, what that is. It's kind of interesting. I didn't get a slide worked into the presentation on it, but as we were going through Manila on Friday, as I was waiting for my flight back, we were on they have an elevated roadway, and I was noticing these big sections that had all these round grid of things on it. And what in the world is it? So I had to snap a picture of it as we're flying along, and I pull it on my phone and I zoom in, and there are electric meters. 30 to 40 electric meters on either side of this panel, and this panel is on top of a pole 45 feet up in the ground, 45 feet up off of the ground. Of course, the road level is parallel to it, so you can see it pretty easy. But you got to wonder, who in the world is the poor guy that's got to go up and read those meters? And how do they figure anything out? And I shared this picture with a few of my coworkers back at the mill, and they laughed and said, "Man, that would be a troubleshooting nightmare." I said, "No, it's probably not that hard. Just follow the smoke. That's all you got to do. Just follow the smoke." And I told one of the brothers that, and he got a chuckle. I said, "Yeah, that's pretty much how it works." But just something to get an idea. We're used to things being neat and orderly, and there's a reason why, because we have things as a country that we have established. The National Electric Code that says this is a way certain things should and must be done. And for other reasons, it's for safety. They don't have that regulatory, control over there. So it's fair game. And again, one of the brothers I was talking to even just a couple of days ago, as we were messaging back and forth, says, "Yeah, it's crazy how many men lose their lives that work for the power company because they're not adequately trained. They don't know the dangers that can happen from that." So, but again, not to get too tied up, I just thought that was, as an electrician, that interests me. So you get to share it. But these next few screenshots are going to be maybe kind of hard to see. But Tuguegarao there is located just a little bit off center to the right near the bottom a little bit for where Tuguegarao is in this greater area. And this is kind of the working area in which we worked in my time there as we get past the weekend of the lectureships that happened at the Tuguegarao Metro Church of Christ. And as we started exploring around, and I'll detail more of those later as we get into that part of my presentation. And so the airport there, of course, is that long line over on the right side. As you can see, that's where the airport is. And then as you go down to the to the south of that, straight down, you'll have the main area of Tuguegarao, Main Street being right down through the middle there. And then you have a really interesting angular road that comes off of here. And that plays kind of an important role, at least for me, because I'm a visual person and I like seeing things visually that way. Our hotel is all the way over on the far right, over here. And that is the Hotel Roma, is in that little circle over there. And so the reason why it's kind of significant is, guess how many stoplights, stop signs, and yield signs are in between our hotel and where the next dot is, which is where the building is located for the Metro, Tuguegarao Metro Church of Christ. Guess how many? 0. Not a single control light, not a single stop sign, not a single yield sign. And so, as you might imagine, driving in rush hour traffic can be tense. But as unsettling it is when you first start, after a day or two there, guess what? It's normal. And it's interesting because beyond a nice, casual, light little tap, beep, beep, letting you know that they're behind you or they want to pass you, you don't get any, get out of the way, and none of that. And in the time I was there, never once witnessed a single accident. Nobody running into anybody. And when you come up to an intersection, you don't wait for somebody to let you in. You'll be there all day. You just simply slowly move out, and eventually the car that's coming towards you or the moped that's coming towards you, or the tricycle that's coming towards you, the trike, will yield and give way and let you horn in. And then, of course, then you have to worry about the cars. If you're crossing across, they will do the same and let you in, and then you just go on your merry way. I mean, obviously, it means things are a little slower moving maybe than what we're used to, but again, in between that time, and then again, nowhere, I saw one stop sign in the entire city and when I was there, and it wasn't for cars, it was for pedestrians. Which I thought, okay. And it wasn't in Tigigaraw, it was one of the small provinces outside near a school, of all cases, of all things. But again, we might think that that's anarchy. How can that work? It works. It works for them. They're used to it. It's okay. And, you know, Jerome, the one fellow that did the most of our driving, as well as Mark, another fellow that did a little bit of driving for us, you know, after a couple of days said, "So, Craig, you ready to drive?" Nope. For one, I'm not licensed to drive in your country unless a passport gives me authorization to, but we're not going down that road. I'm happy. You do you. I'll sit over here and just be in awe. But we arrived then on Wednesday evening. We had Bible study, of course, there. On Wednesday, we got to the hotel, about noon, a little after. They gave us the rest of the day to rest and kind of get our bearings after the long flight, because again, we left Monday at 11 o'clock here is when our flight left O'Hare, and we got in to Tigigaraw at noon on Wednesday, their time. And so we had been, a lot of time between airplanes and things, and we're ragged. So we came there for the Bible study and then had dinner with the Gum Pads Wednesday evening. And then Thursday at 8 o'clock, we started our lecture series there at the church building in Tigigaraw Metro. And, nice banners and stuff they like to make up for the visiting people. Never had my face on a banner before. So it's kind of cool. And so we had about 110, 120 average attendance for each of the days we were there. Thursday, Friday, Saturday were the 3 days of the actual lectureship. Keith was giving the talks on the book, the big picture of the Bible, the same thing he's going through us with on a monthly study each month. And I was simply there to lead songs. When I say simply, that was one of the things that blew me away about the brethren there. And part of the reason why I wanted to introduce you to their practice of when they get there starting to sing. Because when we rolled up to the door at about 7:30, 7:45 Thursday morning, there was probably already 50, 60 men there. They were already singing. And so we just walked in, sat down, started singing a little bit, and then the course of the structure of the lectureship is I would lead singing for about an hour. We'd have a little bit of a break. Keith would give a talk. Have a little bit of a break. I would lead singing for another 45 minutes. Keith would give his second talk. We'd break for lunch. I would lead singing for about another half hour. Keith would give his third talk. I would then, after a little break, lead singing again for another half hour. Have a little break. Keith would then have his last course. So we did 4 rounds of this each day on Thursday and Friday. Saturday was a little abbreviated. We were done by about 3 o'clock. We didn't go as late. We only had 3 sessions on Saturday. But I probably averaged about 2.5 hours worth of leading singing those 3 days. And one of the amazing things to me is I normally can't lead singing up here for more than 20 or 30 minutes before I'm done. But I was able to endure and to continue in that. And Sister Tessie, whether or not she could hear, I was starting to get a little raspy. By Friday morning, she gave me a special drink concoction of a Filipino citrus fruit called, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, calamansi. And it's kind of like, envision a green orange, but it actually is a combination of a lime and a lemon. But a very, very good throat elixir, mixed in with just a little bit of sugar, make it sweet, hot, served hot. But it was very soothing, and it was her, her cup of water, cold water as it were, in service to that. And whether it or it was the Lord helping to keep my voice strong to go through it, it was a very enriching and rewarding experience from that. The people just absolutely loved to sing. They just loved to sing. And what's another thing that was amazing to me is that 99.9% of it is always in English. They have their own, of course, Filipino language. And they actually have two different primary dialects. And so I wasn't prepared for that mentally when I came in. Well, you're going to have me lead singing. But Keith kind of said, well, they normally, communicate pretty well in English. I'm like, okay, well, all right. I'm going to a foreign country. That seems, odd to me. But it wasn't. And it was very, very, again, very uplifting, very, very heartwarming in their passion, their desire to lead that. And I was able to lead several songs that they had never heard before. And they invited me to lead those again in the next session, or lead them again in the next session. So, again, just a very encouraging time in that. Additionally, I guess I'll just throw this in here too. They also have songbooks that are made up, that are written and provided about 60 to 80 songs in 3 different languages, English and then their 2 Filipino dialects. No music, just the lyrics. And they sing them to the tune of all regardless of what the song is, even if it's in one of their dialects or one of their languages, they sing it in the tune that we know. And of course, you have to imagine what the words are in English so you can kind of sing along. But when you get out into the smaller congregations that I do have a few pictures of, that's the book that they use. We used here at the Tuguegarao Metro, we used the Sacred Selections that I grew up on. In West Virginia is the song they use. And actually, the last place we went on Wednesday used Steve Wolfgang's book, Psalms, Hymns, and Spiritual Songs, was the book that they had to use. But again, just the heart and the attitude and the desire to want to sing was just impressive to me in that. And of course, Keith doing his lessons during there. And then on Saturday, as we were wrapping up, this is just one of the pictures of the groups of some of the preachers that were in attendance there, as well as our primary host, that's Rhodey, of course, in the middle. Willie, a pastor, is on the far right for you. Dennis is in the middle there. And of course, that's in front of the building, which used to be a hotel. The upper floor there has rooms that they have, so that way when they have these seminars and these lectureships, they have places for preachers that are coming from long distances, and then places that they can stay there. So part of the way that they can accommodate them. And of course, Rhodey's house is literally just to that little pavilion is the carport to his place, which is right there in the parking lot complex, right there on site with the building. And then Sunday comes. Well, Sunday, I was asked to lead preach a sermon Sunday morning during the Bible class time. I picked a sermon that I've done here before on leadership. And then Keith had the regular worship hour with his sermon. And then, of course, afterwards, I have the shirt that I decided to wear called the Baroque. It's their version of a tuxedo shirt, in all honesty. Something that they reserve for, and you wear it at only special occasions. This one is kind of not as flashy. Other ones that they have are actually more sheer, and those are reserved for actual real special events like weddings and other things that may occur. But again, it was an honor that they presented me with this, and so that's why I'm wearing it before you all even this evening. Good, gracious people. And so on Sunday then afternoon, after we finished up there at Tuguegarao Metro, I went with Jerome to sorry about the slides there. Something happened between the 2 versions we got here. Nagirig is the name of the place, and it is located there it is, up in that upper corner where that red circle is. I couldn't find the actual physical church building to actually detail like I wanted to, but Jerome Fairlow is the preacher there. He is actually the son-in-law of Rhodey and Tessie, married their daughter. His wife, their daughter is Kathy, and she's right there in the front. She's a doctor, and had a very good service there. At this particular time, because that particular congregation isn't so well suited in understanding English, does a summarization where a preacher that comes that doesn't know their dialect, he preaches his sermon, and then the person, in this case Jerome, stands up and then gives a summarization of what the lesson was. That includes in that an invitation to come and to obey the gospel. And then these three men are Jerome being in the middle, one of our primary drivers, another fellow by the name of Dennis, and I cannot remember the guy on the far right. But all preachers of that area and inside of their building there at McGarrick. On Monday then, we went out into the northern area, and this is where I got to see Jacobin. Jacobin is the preacher of the San Vincent Church of Christ in Galatron. I'm not pronouncing any of these right, I'm sure. But the building is located right there within that circle, up north. Took about 45, 50 minutes to get there. If I remember right, it was less than 20 miles distance from where we were at in Tuguegarao. So not a long drive, but the roads aren't that great, in the Philippines. Most of them are 2-lane. Again, fairly rough concrete, so it's pretty slow going. And these are not working out at all. I'm sorry, this is kind of throwing me. This was inside the building that we had, again, fairly modern. No air conditioning, as you can imagine. There is an air conditioning unit that's a little box that's way up front on the stage that kind of helps give the preacher a little bit of relief. But that is, you stand up there and you have your service. Keith presented his lesson, and again, in this case, Jerome again, like he summarized for me on Sunday, summarized for Keith there, and then we ended up having a meal together, and then after that, and that is, of course, Jacobo and his wife, where they work in the building there that we got to finally meet one of the men again that we support, of the four that we support from here. From there, we went to the next place we went is Santiago. Santiago Church of Christ, and it is on that little mountain there. And you can't really quite tell it. The road comes down. We had to park at the end. It's about 150, 200 yards walk up dirt roads, up a pretty good hill to the actual building and place where worship was. That is building there is the last part. Those are just simply plastic chairs that they had set up, outside. So again, more of a rustic, rural kind of setting to it. Corrugated steel for the roof, open rafters, block walls. But the people that were there had probably 40 or 50 people there in attendance. Again, this is on a Monday afternoon in 98 plus degree heat, and had been there waiting for a while for us to get there as well. And so we have our service there, leading songs, as well as Keith presenting the lesson, Jerome once again summarizing the lesson, and then just a view of some of those that were actually even sitting outside that didn't have room inside to take. And I just felt this was worth sharing. That's a picture of the view from the top of the mountain outside of that building. And so for me, being a nature lover and being able to see the beauty and the things that God created, I asked him if it was okay if I walked away, because I had to walk about another 100 or so yards away from the building to be able to get this viewpoint, to get this vantage point. And they really didn't want me to walk away because I don't know what they thought was going to happen to me. Maybe there were some dangerous animals. The only biggest thing I ever saw was some basic water buffalo, but you never know. But they went with me out there to take the picture. So again, just some of the beauty of their country is absolutely, can be breathtaking, just to look around and to notice. Yeah. And so then on Tuesday, we'll move on, we had the area of Baguio. I believe I'm pronouncing that one right, or Baguio. And it's again another fairly, very poor region, north of Tuguegarao, closer than where we had gone the day before. And there were two congregations that we visited there. Again, I looked for probably almost 2 hours to try to find the buildings, and I could not find them on Google Maps, so you'll have to go by that. These were 8 of the souls that were baptized based on the lesson and the invitation that was extended after Keith was done that morning. And then the second place we went, excuse me, was a congregation in an area called Remus. I'm sorry, that was Remus. This is in the next place we went called Masset. Again, very small congregation right off the side of the road. This was a little different because when we would show up, the preacher of the congregation would decide whether or not he wanted a summarization or if he wanted a translation. And the preacher here wanted a translation. And so Keith would have to give a sentence or two, and then Jerome would translate that. It's kind of funny because I believe I took this picture right after Keith went on a ramble for about, maybe 5 or 6 sentences. And I remember Jerome stopping, giving him one of those, and he goes, "You do it." And he did. But again, just how the logistics, of having language barriers and how that works and how that looks. I thought it was interesting to share this picture because this is their sign. It's right there by the main road. And the quote that is taken there at the bottom when it says, "I was glad when they said, 'Let's go up to the house of the Lord.'" And what a profound statement, of course, that is, that we should all have that attitude when it comes to our times to be able to come together, that we should be glad when we are called to come out and go up to the house of the Lord to be able to worship and praise Him. And so as we were heading out, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jerome says, "Thank you, come again." A little archway that went over the road as we were leaving that Providence of Baguio. And so pretty ornate, concrete, looking like trees, but left an impression on me. Then on Wednesday, we split up. That is, Keith and I split up. Keith went with Jerome to a couple of other congregations. Rhodey wanted to take me and with Tessie to another region, and that would be in the the region of, cannot say these names at all, Kalinga, which is off to the east, a little bit north and east of Tuguegarao. Again, a much more sparsely, much more rural area than the city. So we went to 3 different places. The first place we went was probably the largest square footage building, and it's kind of unique. You can see from the side there's some fresh concrete beside the tile, and I'll point that out a little bit later on, but they had recently expanded the building because of their numbers. And I believe Cindy that asked me when I first got back if I had any idea on attendances, and I really hadn't paid attention, but as I was looking through my pictures, I got like 5 or 6 pictures that had the attendance charts that I was able to blow up and see. Average attendance so far is probably in the 60s to 80s per service on a Sunday service. They have probably 40 to 60 adults and another 15 to 25 children that they break down and list separately on their attendance. So, sister, that's what that was, and I'm sorry I didn't catch that before. But here it is. I preached a sermon on securing the heart. Rhodey is the one doing the summarization for my place that morning, first place we stopped. These gentlemen here in this family is Geronimo Ganila. He is the older man in front. He is the preacher of that congregation and also an elder there. It's his grandson, Gerald, that I'm standing beside, who is also studying to be a preacher. He's actually a school teacher in electrical. He went to school to be an electrical engineer, didn't meet his qualifications, so right now he's teaching at the local elementary school, electronics and electricity. That is his wife, or I'm sorry, Geronimo's wife beside me, and then their sister and daughter as well in that picture from that congregation. There were 5 that were baptized that morning, and done right there behind the building. They have the water pool there that they fill up for that purpose. And mentioning the construction of the building, you see the big pile of rubble in the front, just to the right of the car? That's the old building. Okay? What they did was they built the new shell around the old shell until it was done, and then they ripped the old shell out. And it was still, collected there in a big pile of rubble in the front yard. So where there's a will, there's a way, and that was their way of handling and making an improvement for a bigger building that they needed for their purposes. And there's like 6 slides missing, so I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint. So you have to go the rest of this just blind, and it's going to throw me off a little bit too. The second place we went to was called Second Avenue Church of Christ. And it was more in a jungle, remote area, very, very sparse. And when we were there, I was preaching. I got about 10 minutes into my sermon, and wouldn't you know it, a nice, big, heavy, old-fashioned thunderstorm came in. And sometimes I always wondered because I see pictures, and they always have these microphones and these big, huge PA systems with all these large speakers. That's why. Because when you get against a thunderstorm with a tin roof and it just pouring and pounding the rain and thunder and lightning, I was shouting at the top of my lungs, and it didn't seem like it was going beyond the front row. So I finished up my sermon anyway. Rhodey got the microphone, and he summarized in their dialect, and that's where it was kind of touching. I had 2 sisters that bring me up bags of Lisa calls them peas. They're beans. But she looked them up, and they're a version of a pea, just as a gift, of prosperity, that they actually harvested, dried there on the mountain that we were on. It wasn't like they went to market to buy a bag of it and then just break it apart. I mean, it's something that they labored with their own hands. So that's a special gift. I brought that home. And I've got to get my wife to make it, even though she hates pea soup. I might have to make it myself. But it's kind of funny because when I got back to the gum pads, guess what Tessie gave me? About a gallon bag full of those things. So we got enough to eat for a while. But they are very good. I enjoyed them. She had a dish prepared with them even that night, and it was very, very good. And so after we stopped there and got out of the rain, our last stop was called Tagapon Church of Christ. It was one of the more touching stories because the preacher there that had really founded and started the work in that small community was their first victim of COVID in 2020. And so they had lost their regular preacher. His wife was remaining faithful there, and they had been having other surrounding preachers come in and fill in and do the work there. And so, again, just the number, probably 45 people showed up. Again, we're talking on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They heard that we were going to be there for a study, and people just showed up to support. And so, again, very, very encouraging. That's where I picked up. They went out and they grabbed 2 fresh dragon fruit. Dragon fruit. We think that's such an exotic thing. I mean, it's all over the place up there. They brought me a couple, and just so happy to share anything that they could. And it was a pleasure, of course, to be in them. Wednesday evening, then finally, we made it back a little late into Digigorao for Wednesday evening Bible study. Keith was already in process of getting set up to do our services for that evening. And of course, that was going to be my last night in Digigorao in the Philippines, well, not in the Philippines, but in Digigorao, because I was set to fly back early Thursday morning back to Manila, which after we got done with our dinner, they took me back to the hotel. And it's kind of funny, I got a call on my messenger from Rhodey, said, hey, we're downstairs, we got something for you. okay. And Kathy, the one I pointed out earlier, comes in with this bag full of 4 bags of dried mangoes, some of their Filipino shortbread cookies. I think Goldilocks is the name brand on it, and just some little things that they felt, a wooden carved statue of an eagle, which is their national bird. Looks a lot like a bald eagle. And just, as a thank you and a memento for the visit there. And so it was very touching that they thought to do that for me. And then Thursday morning, then I get up, they meet me there at the hotel, we go back to the airport, and I begin the flight home. Of course, if you follow me on the Facebook account, that's when I got a message actually on Tuesday from ANA Airlines, who we had our flights through, that's saying that there's a potential of a typhoon coming in through Tokyo, so be prepared, you might have a flight cancellation. Well, when I got back to the airport, I was actually messaging and talking with Lisa when I got an email that said, yeah, you got to find another way home, or we'll have to make other arrangements. And after going through several different things, and me not being a world traveler and knowing how that stuff works, I thought, well, how soon can you get me home? Well, the first time I was on hold for over an hour and a half, and they said, well, we can get you home Sunday. It's like, well, okay. I'd rather get home earlier, but Sunday's better than, another week. Well, as she's trying to make those arrangements, either the call drops or she hangs up on me. I don't know what happened. This is after an hour and a half. Of course, that's a bad thing for an American, right? So I call back again. Well, what's the odds you're going to get a hold of the same person you just spoke to? 0. And of course, they have all these flights that they're canceling, because it's not just my flight. It's everything flying in and out of Tokyo is being canceled because of this typhoon that's coming in. And so the next agent, give the same spiel to them, said, well, let me see what I got. Well, the earliest I can get you out is Thursday. I said, no, wait a minute. She already reserved a flight for me on Sunday and said, I could have that. I said, well, that's no longer available. That's already been filled. Soonest I can get you on Thursday. And I said, I can't, be around Manila for another week, and I just wasn't getting what he was telling me to do. Basically, he was trying to tell me without telling me that, listen, dude, ask for a refund. We'll refund your money. You take your money, find another ticket. And so it finally clicked. After the third time he said, well, we can give you a refund. We can give you a refund. I said, okay, well, maybe I should. I said, hold on. So I made other arrangements. But anyways, got back on a flight through United through Taipei, which of course wasn't impacted by the typhoon. That was a little bit of a fiasco too, because we were late getting out of Taipei, which made me late getting into San Francisco, which made me miss the flight to Chicago, which means I had to go to Orange County, which means I didn't get into Chicago instead of getting in at 2:30 when I was supposed to land. I didn't get into about 11:30. Poor wife had to come out to Chicago O'Hare Airport near midnight to pick me up in the middle of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and we had to drive home. So, kudos to my beautiful wife for allowing me to go, one, and for her graciousness. And she wouldn't let me drive. I don't know why, because I got up at 2 o'clock Saturday morning, my time, which is 2 in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Friday, your time. And I didn't go to sleep except for maybe an hour or two here and there, 15 minutes, 30 minutes here and there for about an hour or two all the way through until I got to Chicago. So I was up for almost 34 hours straight. And so she wouldn't let me drive. And I don't know why. Why wouldn't she let me drive? But through God's grace and everything, I made it home safely. And again, I just want to, there's so much I could say. I had so many other pictures to pour through that I wanted to share with you, brethren. But it would be here till midnight to go through them all. And again, a year of first ever leaving the country. This is the first time I've ever given a report on something that I've done. So really out of my element. And I appreciate your all's patience with me this evening. But it was great to go. It was encouraging beyond all of my imagination. It was absolutely just I think I told Chris a number of times, just a rewarding experience. And that's the best way that I can put it. Very, very rewarding. They're not us. But that's okay. They do things their way. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have that little pre-service to kind of get us out of our rut. One of the things that when I came back and I sat down in the first service, when I came back Sunday morning, and I told Mark and Cindy this because we had lunch together, it just felt sterile here, by contrast. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But there is so much going on. And I don't know if it's a lot of because of the language differences. You've got translating going on back and forth that I was hearing behind me when Keith was preaching or what it was. But here, we are very, very respectful. And that is a good thing. And I don't want us to lose that. And I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that, we're from now on, if I have anything to say as an elder that we're going to sing songs as soon as people start showing up. No. Again, that was just a one-off thing just to get an idea and an experience. But I hope that in our state of which we do things, we don't forget the passion that we should have in our hearts for our service to God. And that it needs to exude from us. And it needs to be regardless of what circumstances we find ourselves in or what hurdles or obstacles may be in the way. We are blessed to live in the United States that we live, and we have what we have, without a doubt. But let's not lose sight of the fact that if we lose it, that it's going to call us into question of whether or not we're going to remain faithful. Because something could happen. And it may not be comfortable to come in here and sit because something else happens. It may be 150 degrees in here. Are you going to come anyway? Are you going to serve the Lord to the best of your ability regardless of what you might face? And of course, I would hope we would all say, of course, we're here on Sunday night, right, Mark? We would say, sure, absolutely. But before I quit, we always have a habit, and it's a good one, to be considerate of those that have not yet named Jesus as their Lord and as their Savior. And even though, as Josiah said, not a lesson as such, but there are many lessons, as Chris prayed for and mentioned, that hopefully can be learned even what I presented, and how we can internalize those things and we can consider them. There's a fountain free is the song that Josiah has picked. And again, it is indeed a free fountain. But as the also saying that we understand, it wasn't cheap. It cost a time. It cost more than any of us can ever imagine to have access to what it is that God wants and what He has in store for His people. And of course, that is those that are going to be willing to yield and submit to Him, to understand the fact that they are lost and they are undone in their sin. And there's nothing that I can do about my sin except for believe in Jesus, and except for be obedient to Him, and except for yielding to Him. And that's not anything of a great work. That's taking advantage of the grace that He's given to us and exemplifying my faith in Him and putting my faith into practice and putting that faith into obedience, as Romans talks about, by doing what it is that He has asked to do. And so if you have not yet named Jesus and you understand your lost case, your lost position, that you are not in Christ because you are in rebellion and you understand what sin is. We have the means, we have the desire, we have the want to help you come to Jesus and to come to the fountain that He has poured forth from His blood and from His body in that blood to have your sins washed away. Won't you consider that blood this evening? Won't you render service to Him? Won't you be baptized? And if you have already done that and you have allowed yourself to fall and have allowed yourself to be entangled, and you need the prayers to help you not continue down that path, and we can help you to be restored, then we as your family so desperately want you to come forward too, so that we can have an influence, so that we can pray for you, and we can work with you. Whatever your case may be, if you are subject, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.